You're listening to Talk of Champions, an Ole Miss Spirit podcast with Ben Garrett.
It's time! It's time! It's time! It's time! It's time!
Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to a live Talk of Champions. Right there is Ben Garrett in the RiverLand Roofing studio. We're both in the state of Mississippi. For this one, though, we're going to be reunited Tuesday as spring football gets going. But, Ben, huge weekend for Ole Miss as both the men's and women's teams get into March Madness.
Yes.
First SEC baseball series, tough one. But we are presented by our friends at RiverLand Roofing. Always want to lead off with that.
RiverLand Roofing, for all your roofing needs, our friend Billy Landis and company at RiverLand, they've been with us for 2 years now, just powering everything we do. RiverlandRoofing.com, 662-644-4297. Yes, for the first time ever, Mr. Billy Embody, Ole Miss men's and women's basketball are both in the NCAA tournament field, and that sounds insane because it is. It is insane. But it has happened finally in the year of our Lord 2025. Ole Miss women and men both going to the postseason. Thoughts about both of them? I'm going to start with the women. The fact that they're not hosting is absolutely absurd. They should be host. And Coach Yo said it after the selection show, how ridiculous it was, how shocked she was. It makes absolutely no sense. Whatever explanation you get, it isn't going to be one worth the paper it was written on. There's no doubt in my mind that team with this resume, it just shows you selection committees at the end. They're not always doing it by just the criteria, the resumes, if you will. That Ole Miss women are having to go to friggin' Washington rather than host a game in Oxford that they earned. I think that's absolutely absurd. Now, for the men, what a draw, Billy and Bonnie. What a draw. I like it. You're on Auburn side of the bracket. Maybe the fourth time would be the charm if you make that kind of run. But the SEC had 14 teams in, the greatest conference ever. There's been some, discourse out there about no league should ever be able to produce 14 teams. I have some numbers, Mr. Billy and Body. The SEC is 185-23, or was 185-23 against non-conference opponents. An 89% winning percentage. Never in the history of college basketball has a conference had greater than an 82% winning percentage in non-conference play. Of course, the SEC got a record 14 bids to the NCAA tournament because the 14th team in the SEC or 13th, 12th, take Oklahoma, for example, beating these quality teams that you thought deserved more bids than they did. Oklahoma beat Arizona, Louisville, and Michigan. Georgia beat St. John's, the story of college basketball. Those are lower-tier SEC basketball teams. Ole Miss went with 10 wins in the league, beat not only Louisville, BYU, Colorado State, a bid stealer. Honestly, the one true gripe is not how many teams, Billy, the SEC got in. It's the fact that North Carolina got in at 1-12 in quad ones, and their athletic director sitting as the committee selection chair. It's corruption right in your face. There's no recourse for leaving out West Virginia, who was in every single projected bracket going into Selection Sunday. West Virginia got screwed because the North Carolina AD sits as the selection committee chair, period. You can't convince me otherwise. Sure, Indiana get left out, fine. Okay. You can make some other cases for the left out teams, but not West Virginia. West Virginia deserved to be in. This is not a West Virginia podcast, but these injustices shall not stand, Billy and Body. But, of course, it's the NCAA tournament, and Ole Miss is in, women and men for the first time ever. I'm not going to complain. The 10th all-time appearance for Ole Miss basketball in the NCAA tournament in its 115-year history. So good positive vibes only. Not even caring that Ole Miss blew winning the series against number 3 Arkansas in baseball this weekend, dropped to number 18 in the poll according to D1 Baseball. Poor Owen Payno, man. That Sunday, I hate it for him because all throughout the preseason how good of a preseason he had, how highly ranked he was. This is a major league draft pick. Not all developmental tracks are the same, but man, 3 errors on Sunday, 3 errors. It would do Mike Bianco well to save the kid from himself and play anybody else while he figures it out, because we've seen freshmen go through this. Greg Kessinger went through it, not the same kind of defensive struggles. This is both sides of it right now for Owen. He just needs to get his mind right, but man, what a tough series loss. Encouraging signs, but again, you drop 2 of 3 after winning the opener. That's always going to be an unsuccessful weekend when you have to build out your resume for the postseason, the SEC. But at least they didn't look like the uncompetitive team of the last 2 years. But today in the RiverLand Roofing Studios, Ben's fired up. I'm fired up. And I'll tell you why, is because Ole Miss basketball has always, we can't ever take this for granted, ever. Because I have been alive on this earth, or watching, following, covering Ole Miss sports for 38 years. All right. I can count on one hand the NCAA tournament appearances. So never, ever take for granted what Ole Miss did yesterday, getting in so comfortably as a 6 seed. I love the draw, even though it's in Auburn's side of the bracket. I think you got the bracket there with all the TV stuff. But I'm looking at the bracket and their side of it. Auburn, Louisville at an 8. They've already beaten Creighton. 5. Michigan is a 5. Texas A&M is a 4. I mean, are you scared of Texas A&M? No. But if Ole Miss wins, defeats either San Diego State or North Carolina, the absolute nonsense bid sealer that it was, 1-12 against quad ones this year. I love the matchup potentially against Iowa State or Lipscomb. I then would be not all that opposed to a Marquette, New Mexico matchup. Michigan State's on their side. Bryant, you could see Ole Miss match the greatest achievement in school history, one solitary Sweet 16 appearance this year with this draw. It's that good, but you got to get through San Diego State and North Carolina first. And if you get to the Sweet 16, Billy, you're talking about a matchup for the 4th time this year with Auburn, the top overall seed in Atlanta. Sign me up, Billy. Sign me up.
No, it's a reasonable draw for sure. And I think, Iowa State, if they get by Lipscomb, that's not a bad draw either. And now I will say the immediate question was, well, who do you want to face, San Diego State or North Carolina? I've watched a lot of North Carolina this year, but I've also just heard about SDSU and the noise that they're making out west getting into the tournament, obviously. I mean, I would rather face North Carolina. I just think Ole Miss will be able to kind of clamp down the Tar Heels a little bit more from what I've watched, at least of North Carolina this year. And, Jake Thompson and I were at the watch party yesterday, and he turns to me and goes, RJ Davis is still in college? I said, yeah, he might be 30, but he's still in college. And, that's a veteran team. They also have Ian Jackson, who's a really good up-and-coming player. But San Diego State is one of those teams that just seems like a Cinderella. They could get hot, they could win, they could advance. You don't want to face a team like that. You want somebody who's kind of slipped in maybe into the NCAA tournament, the last team in, North Carolina. So that's who I would rather face if you're Ole Miss. And even though they were the last team to get in, you might get a little bit more street cred by beating them just because blue blood, even though they slipped in over all the teams that you mentioned. I mean, West Virginia, they have a gripe. They have quite the reason to wake up today. And Ren Baker tweeted out, their resume, and man, they do have a gripe and a half, I would say, toward the NCAA tournament committee. But Ole Miss is in. Chris Beard, I asked him actually about, being in that 6 seed versus that 11 seed that gets that, I guess, whoever wins it, it's kind of not a warm-up by any means, but you kind of get into the groove of March Madness. And he said, I've never been in this position before. I don't know how to feel about facing a team that gets to play on, I guess, Wednesday or first 4. But they get that kind of midweek game to kind of get back into the groove after being off for however many days. Like otherwise, I think North Carolina lost on, I guess it would have been Thursday in the ACC tournament. So they would have had a full week off. Ole Miss, full week off. You know, that's kind of an intriguing storyline that they get to go out on the floor and play a game, and kind of whoever emerges from that is at least been into the groove. They've been in the arena before. So that's kind of one of those interesting things with the first four is you haven't had that layoff. So Ole Miss will have to be ready. I mean, they're going to have to rely on their defense. They're going to have to come out and create that energy that even though you're in the NCAA tournament and you say, well, they really got to create their own energy. Yeah, you do. You know, it's up in Milwaukee. You've been off for that amount of time. You're going to have to be ready to go because San Diego State or North Carolina will have just been playing for their right to even appear in the true field of the NCAA tournament. So they're going to have that, you know, true postseason grind in a way under their belt, that experience of playing a really, I guess, do or die game of basketball. And that's something that kind of can't be discounted. So Ole Miss is going to have to bring it Friday, 3:05 p.m. Central Time on TNT. A perfect way to take a half day Friday, go somewhere, watch the game. You know, if you're a Funkies fan, if you're a fan of wherever in the square, that's probably a good spot to be because it's going to be popping.
Funkies was the perfect spot for the selection show. Aesthetically, the layout, the way it looked, both on social and in real life, everything about how Ole Miss did it, it was perfect. Yeah, Funkies was perfect for it, and I was so glad that I was going to go too, but then I mean we have two guys there. It was all right. We have Bill and Jay. You know, it was packed up. So I was going to go too, and because this is something worthy of celebration, and you're right, man. The first game, in my opinion, is the trickiest of all of them. Because of that first four disadvantage. I really don't like the first.
Yeah, I don't like.
Yeah, I don't like the first four because of that specifically. Now, Ole Miss has played in the first four, and you know I've seen the other side of it where it didn't really mean as much. But you've seen it in professional baseball too. Those teams that get the long layoffs because they won, and you're quote rewarding them, and then the wild card teams are playing a series before they go right into the next series. It's hard to just pick up and keep playing. It's hard to just shut it all down, get the reset, and then just come back full bore. But Ole Miss is tasked with that. Now, the North Carolina conundrum really frustrates me because, again, here's the selection committee chair, Bubba Cunningham, again, sits as the selection chair at North Carolina AD. Speaking of West Virginia, who everybody had, again, projected in the tournament, he says, quote, about West Virginia, they were 13-10 after Tucker DeVries went out. So that's part of the reason that the committee made the decision that it made. Why do they play the games then?
I know.
They played all season, just like when Florida State got left out of the college football playoff. I don't care about the Jordan Travis consideration. That you find the best teams that are worthy. And they were worthy. And that's not even a bet like they were 13-10. Oh, they were 3 games ahead, better than 500. You know who was 1-12 against quad 1 teams this year? North Carolina. They had quite literally no argument to get in. Now, as far as who do you want to see, Ben? North Carolina or San Diego State? First, I think San Diego State's a better basketball team. And North Carolina is North Carolina. I would like – that's a dream matchup. That's one of those when you're sitting in school coming up and you're in New Albany, Brandon, Amory, Corinth, and you're sitting in pre-algebra, and they say, man, football, baseball, basketball, who are your dream opponents? Well, football, you're going to say Notre Dame, right? Basketball, you'd be hard-pressed. You'd say Duke, who has beaten North Carolina 3 times this year, and yet they still got in the tournament. North Carolina would be amongst that group. I mean, you would say, oh, I want to see Ole Miss play UNC. So it'd be a dream kind of postseason matchup in that way. I just hate it that it was sacrificed off of bureaucratic bullshit. Forgive me, Lord God, for saying another bad word, but like it's bureaucracy in its worst form. West Virginia had no reason to be left out. It was crappy. Imagine if you're Ole Miss and that happened. Yeah, you're in the SEC, and the SEC had a record 14 and deserved it. I don't want to hear anybody say no league ever deserved to get 14 of their 16 teams.
They took care of business.
Yeah,
they took care of business with the opportunities they had.
The non-conference had the league had a 89% winning percentage in the non-con. These teams that y'all love right now, Colorado State was such a fun run. They stole a bid. Ole Miss whooped them. Louisville, who has been one of the hottest teams in college basketball, Ole Miss beat them up at their place. And this is just Ole Miss's resume. Oklahoma did this too, and they're at the bottom of the league because the league did what we all knew it was going to do. It was going to just destroy itself. It was going to eat itself alive. So I'm glad that the SEC got its due, because it took a long time for the SEC to get to this place, to go from the place of, oh, we love basketball after football. No, schools started taking it seriously. Auburn, they're the top overall seed. Bruce Pearl, Chris Beard is the head coach at Ole Miss. And the last time, I should say, that the Ole Miss men, not basketball, just men in general, were in an NCAA tournament was 2 years ago, and they won the whole thing. So why not? Because in year 2 under Chris Beard at Texas Tech, they went to the national title game. Who's to say this team can't? This team has defense that will travel. I mean, and defense in the NCAA tournament, especially at the elite level that Ole Miss has, the greatest, far and away, best assist to turnover in school history. This team has a shot, but that first matchup, I'm with you. I think that's the trickiest one of all. Do I think they would, if they got to play Auburn in Atlanta in the Sweet 16, do I think they can make it out of that one? Well, the first 3 didn't go particularly well. They gave them their absolute best shot in the SEC tournament and still lost by 5. And everyone's like, hey, yeah, but you know what? They showed they're a tournament team. Of course they got on Auburn's side of the friggin' bracket, right? But there's 14 SEC teams. You're going to find somebody you want to play. I didn't even care that Texas A&M was a 4 ahead of them. I'm not worried about Texas A&M. The fact is that we're talking about the scenarios, not that Ole Miss snuck in, that they got to go here first. They were comfortably in. They celebrated accordingly, and now they get to go run the race. And it's exciting. And again, in year 2 under Chris Beard at Texas Tech, they went to the title game. Why not Ole Miss, right? Could you imagine Ole Miss basketball? It would be kind of perfect too, Billy. After Ole Miss football disappoints and doesn't make it to the college football playoff, won 10 games for the 3rd time in 4 years, which is historic, but didn't make the college football playoff, that basketball would make that kind of run. That would be so fun, man. So hats off to Chris Beard and that group. Obviously, the NCAA tournament is peak as far as the postseason, in my opinion, if you can't tell already. I mean, I love the NCAA tournament. I just hate that West Virginia got screwed. Loved Ole Miss's draw. And that first game, not just because it's the first one, because of the matchups, is going to be most fascinating. I'd love to see it be North Carolina, because that's a dream matchup for little Ole Miss fans everywhere, right? That's an all-timer. I would prefer to have it in Chapel Hill just so I could go see Chapel Hill. But look, on a neutral floor, I'm taking Ole Miss right now over either team that they draw because of the way they play defense. And then from there, you start to build it out. We're here. You're here now. You're finally seeing Ole Miss where you always wanted to see it. Let's not take for granted how comfortably Ole Miss was in the field, how good of a draw it got, how it was rewarded for its good work. And in an SEC that was the greatest league of all time, not just in the SEC, of all time, of all basketball conferences, the toughest league ever, Ole Miss won 10 games and comfortably got in. One of the greatest coaching jobs in Ole Miss sports history. If you consider all the things, one of the greatest by far is Chris Beard in year 2. No matter what happens after this, whether they get bounced in round 1, Indiana gives Chris an offer he can't refuse. No matter what happens, this season was that special. And when you get something like that, you need to hold on to it while you can, because starting Friday for Ole Miss, there's no more, oh, look at the pageantry of this. Look how historic this is. But we can talk about it because
down to work.
115 years, Billy. And this is number 10. 115. That's a long time. Only 3 times in 25 years has Ole Miss gone into the tournament not worrying about if it was going to get in. Yeah. In 25 years, 2001, 2019, and now this year. So hats off to Chris Beard, man.
The last time Chris Beard was in Milwaukee, and this is wild. This is a wild kind of Texas Texas won.
You're
wanna know who
going
they
in and out
faced?
on us, Bill, in your hotel room.
Well, Courtyard.
Now we can hear you. He's back.
Anyway,
Tell me this.
all
Give
right.
me the stat.
Last time Chris Beard was in Milwaukee, he was with Texas. They won their first NCAA tournament game in 8 years, and they beat Sean Padula and Virginia Tech.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
Well, let's hope it goes better for Sean Padula this time, I guess, right?
What a crazy world we live in college sports, man. I mean, what a full circle moment, and how cool is that? But also, good grief, Ole Miss with Texas Tech's national title game head coach, and Virginia Tech, one of his most accomplished players ever, is back in the NCAA tournament. What a weird time. But hey, Ole Miss has thrived in this time. But that's the exciting thing about it. And the fact that in year two, with a team that was thrown together, with a team that after the year's over, they're going to have to rebuild it all back again. To be able to put them together, make them cohesive, not just now and get them to this place, but like early on. You have 9 seniors. All of them have been the dude like Sean Padula was at Virginia Tech, just like you mentioned. These were guys were their dudes at their places. For them to come here, to buy into the team structure, Davin Barnes, for example, completely a role player at Ole Miss. I mean, he was that guy at Sam Houston State. And he settled in and been one of the most valuable Rebels in the last couple of weeks. There's so much to like about what this team could do in the postseason. Do I think they're winning a title? No. But I do think that they absolutely, I've been saying this all year, they're good enough to not only match the greatest appearance or the greatest single accomplishment in Ole Miss basketball history, one solitary Sweet 16 appearance. I think they can do like Texas Tech did in year 2 under Chris Beard and make it at least to the Elite Eight. I really do think with this draw. Do I expect it? No. I'm just going to enjoy the ride for what it is and appreciate the greatest, one of the singular greatest coaching jobs any coach has ever done at Ole Miss. And, you know, we've been talking a lot about how Lane Kiffin, and we talk about it all the time, and we're going to talk about it some more here in a second because spring practice is starting tomorrow. And Billy and I will both be out at the practice fields and we're fired up. But we always talk about how Lane is the, quote, portal king. Basketball is an even more volatile market than even football. And finding a way to put a cohesive team together in this, it takes real expertise. It takes real determination and program smarts and a vision. And Chris Beard, he nailed it. He absolutely nailed it. So, yeah, Friday on TNT, half day. Enjoy it, Ole Miss fan. Ole Miss is getting its first round against hopefully UNC because I think, I don't know, San Diego State kind of freaks me out, Bill. I'm not going to lie to you. I think they can get them. But I think North Carolina has no business being in this tournament, which would be absolutely the most we are Ole Miss outcome ever if North Carolina beats San Diego State or whatever. And then in the second round, I've been talking all this stuff about how UNC and everyone else, too, it's not just me, doesn't deserve to be in, and then they make it to the round of 32 or make it to the Sweet 16. That's how this is going to end up playing out because that's just what March Madness does. But to be in the madness, it's a relief. It's everything and more that the Ole Miss basketball fan could want, and pretty favorable draw. So let's get this thing started, just like with spring football practices, man. That's what I'm most excited about, outside of basketball because that's my favorite. But like tomorrow, Bill, it's tomorrow. It snuck up on us a little bit.
It did.
Little bit.
Well, and before we get to spring ball, I do want to remind you guys to give statusjet.com a look over and reach out to them because they can fly you up to Milwaukee and they can give you that flexibility if Ole Miss, does an Ole Miss thing or something. They can fly you back right after, get you home and coordinate that. But we're going to plan the long weekend up in Milwaukee. StatusJet can handle all of that for you guys. And when you mention the Ole Miss Spirit, they'll give you a discount on your round trip, private trip up there. Do it with friends, do it with family, take clients and see Ole Miss history up in Milwaukee and do it with our friends at StatusJet. They'll fly you up there, take care of your accommodations, planning everything, and help you have the experience of a lifetime. So reach out to statusjet.com for more info there. And Ben, you've already booked your trip. Is that where you're trying to get in?
What I'm saying is StatusJet. I'm trying to figure out how I'm getting to Milwaukee. I'm credentialed, right? I'm ready to go. the Spirit don't cover expenses like it used to, Billy. You know what I mean?
When were you flying private?
Never. But like I can do a 10-hour drive from New Albany to Milwaukee. Then it was like, well, then you got to figure out where to stay, and then all. If Status Jet wants to hook up their friends at Talk of Champions, Ben and Garrett and Billy Embody, we'll roll into Milwaukee.
We'll be paying them for the sponsorship.
Dude, we will be rolling it. We'll do free sponsorship for a year because we'll fly into Milwaukee big time. Years up. Unless somebody out there wants to like have a Ole Miss Spirit like watch party with us, then that would
they can even slap a logo on the side of the plane too. So
yeah,
you can slap your logo. That's the great thing about Status Jet. There's no membership. You don't have to commit to a bunch of stuff. You can get it hooked up. We can have the RiverLand Roofing.
That's what I'm saying. I need Billy Land to say, Billy,
we need a combo. We need a combo.
RiverLand Status Jet sends the Spirit to Milwaukee because I have no idea I'm going to get there. I was talking to Mike Schwartz, the Ole Miss basketball SID last night. He's like, "Are you coming?" Like old days, there was no doubt I'd be there. You know what I mean? Yeah. But the whole world has changed, guys, as far as how this stuff works. And I want to be there. I have no idea how I'm going to get there, but if I do, the party we're going to have in Milwaukee, find your friendly neighborhood ginger strike and let's throw it down because this is the celebratory time. This is March Madness. The last time I truly enjoyed March Madness as far as Ole Miss was 2013 when I was there and they Marshall and them beat up on Wisconsin, and then LaSalle. I don't know. I still don't know how they lost to LaSalle. But, I was booking this. I was about ready to book a flight to L.A. They're going to go to L.A. for the Sweet 16. Maybe they get to the Sweet 16. Atlanta's 4 hours. That's nothing. I got friends.
Easy. That's easy.
That's easy. I got friends in Atlanta. Milwaukee's going to be hard. But if our friends at Status Jet or anybody that want to pay for a Status Jet, hey, Billy over at RiverLand, what's up? Let us know. RiverLand Roofing for all your roofing needs. 662-644-4297, riverlandroofing.com.
Speaking of passing the collection pot around, the Grove Collective got to be having a good weekend, having both the men's and women's getting into the NCAA tournament. Football is hitting the practice field. Another good opportunity for Walker Jones and them to tout what is going to be another strong roster for the Rebels. And we'll get our first look at them Tuesday morning as Lane Kiffin and company will get on the practice field. We hope to get a good look, but we'll see what Lane lets us do there. But we will get a little bit of time to see them. And then, of course, we'll hear from Lane Kiffin after practice as well as some players. So stick to the Ole Miss Spirit, omspirit.com. You can sign up for just $1 for your first week. We've had a bunch of people join us on the site with March Madness, baseball, football recruiting, transfer portals heating up, and more. So, Ben, with us being on the eve of the start of spring ball, where's your head at? What are you most looking forward to seeing in our brief moments out there on the practice field?
Well, number one, Austin Simmons. But if any Ole Miss fan that has been wanting to get pumped up for spring football practice doesn't know it already, at the Ole Miss Spirit, we've been doing a bunch of pre-spring coverage. Jake's been rolling out roster stuff. I've been rolling out roster stuff, depth charts. I'm looking specifically at 3 positions. Number one is the defensive line because they're replacing all 4 starters. Now, Suntaran Perkins is a starter. I mean, even though he wasn't listed as a starter ahead of Princely, that's that guy. But how then Deshaun Womack and Prince Will, his younger brother from Nebraska, the transfer edge, mix in to a mix that they were already excited about with a second-year crop of William Eccles and Cam Franklin, Jeffrey Rush, Cameron Beavers. And also, don't forget, they have some veterans there in the middle. Zay Harris had a monster year last year. Jam Brown was really strong for them. Akilo Stone returns as a depth piece that is invaluable, especially as you're trying to break in new regulars like William Eccles, who's going to play far more next year than he did last year in his debut year. So defensive line, that's the number one position I'm looking at to start. But then it goes right back to the secondary. This whole defense is being made over, and they're replacing all 5 of their starters in the secondary. So Chris Graves, it's time, man. They need you to start. Is Sage Ryan going to be a corner or safety? Is he the one that starts opposite Chris Graves, or is it Jalen Braxton? Or is Jalen Braxton playing as I've heard he's doing and playing safety? If that's the case, well, it makes sense. That's one of the 3 safety spots that is taken care of because Jalen Braxton's starting somewhere. But how the other pieces kind of fall into place. TJ Banks, big spring for you. You're not going to see much of anything on Tuesday, but where they line up and when they line up, I think will be very, very telling for guys specifically like Chris Graves, TJ Banks, Nick Cole on the back end, Sage Ryan positionally, Jalen Braxton. That secondary, I don't know how they're going to put the pieces together. I don't know exactly personnel-wise what they're thinking exactly. I'm going to be rolling out another depth chart later today, the last one about the secondary, and have a lot of these discussions as well when I write it up. But those two position groups are completely in flux and could by themselves carry, as far as storylines, the spring. Now, on the offensive end, again, Austin Simmons is Austin Simmons is Austin Simmons. That's the number one story for everyone. But for me, the offensive line's makeup is interesting, of course, but they actually return some veterans. Whether Jaden Williams is healthy at right tackle and can stay there is a very important piece. Patrick Kudus, is he at center? Is he at guard? Bryson Sanders, how he takes over. But the third spot I'm really looking at is wide receiver, only because they lost so much. Outside of Caden Lee, it's all brand new. All brand new, Bill. So seeing what DeJon Stribling looks like, I think that they want him as their primary X, but he has positional versatility to where he could go play the Y like Juice Wells did. Same thing with a guy like Caden Lee, can play all over, but Caleb Odom, he's more of a true deep threat that's kind of a rigid structure for the X. So there's a lot I want to see from that group. Who emerges? Traylon Ray, Deuce Alexander, 2 more transfers, young cats that are already mid-year enrollees like a Winston Watkins. Can't wait to see him, because what have we seen through 6 years? What has been absolutely true, Bill, through 6 years? Well, you haven't been here for 6 years covering Ole Miss, but I have. And here's what one thing we know for sure about Lane Kiffin teams: it's hard for true freshmen to get on the field. Really hard. So Caleb Cunningham and Winston Watkins and Jacoby Hobson. Jacoby Hobson's already on campus. He could play either safety or linebacker, that jack position, that hybrid position. And I think he could start immediately. There's a lot of interesting storylines about this spring. How much we're going to learn, I don't know. But we're going to go out there on Tuesday when we're allowed. Not allowed out there on Thursday. Maybe allowed on Saturday. I think a lot of this will change a little bit as we get going here. But as it opens, so many stories. What are you most looking forward to? Because there's so many storylines that are of significant interest. But as someone who, like, I feel like I'm way too into this. You know what I mean? Like, I'm way too like, well, you know, they got to break in.
That you're like, okay, all of these different things can happen.
Yeah, well, they got to break in a new punter and a new kicker too. They signed Lucas Canero from Western Kentucky. Like,
there's no question on the kicker. That dude is a dude.
He's legit. Well, see, hey, we learned something right there. Billy Embody telling you right there and there. All I know is what I saw when I was like, oh, Ole Miss is adding so and so. I texted him, said, hey, I heard they're adding you. You're right. Okay, great. I wrote a story. That's my entire experience with Lucas Canero. But they've got a 24-year-old Australian punter, first-year freshman starting punter, but he was kicking all kind of things in Australia. He's replacing Fraser Mason. But for you, as someone who doesn't think about, like, quite literally every single spot and try to break it down, what's the most obvious for an Ole Miss team who has right now an 8.5 over/under according to BetMGM for a win total next year? How do they go over? How do they get to that 9-win regular season like last year, which would be, in my opinion, even more successful than last year, even though it's the same record, right? How do they get to that 10? How do they get in that college football playoff discussion? How does it start this spring from somebody who hasn't been in the trenches like that? Well, if I'm sitting here talking about the replacement for Fraser Mason, I might be a little too close, you know?
No, the big thing that I look for early in spring is, I mean, it sounds cliche, but it's a little bit of an attendance report on the first day. You know, Suntarine Perkins, like, what's he going to look like? He's had, I believe, shoulder surgery. So where's he at in his recovery? Is he very limited? Is he doing anything at all? I mean, personally, he should probably be out there in bubble wrap to begin with. But he's somebody that, we want to see an update on and see where he's at. Because we did mention on the Ole Miss Spirit that he is probably going to be very limited recovering from offseason surgery at the very least. But where is he at? It would be encouraging to see him out there running around a little bit. Other guys like Traylon Ray, Trey Hall, where are they at in their injuries? We'll kind of get a little bit of a glimpse of who's out there even. That's the big thing because, of course, things are tight-knit over there in the Manning Center under lock and key for the most part with a lot of this stuff. But, beyond that, beyond the simple accounting of spring football, I think I look at the secondary. That's the one that you already mentioned, but that is a position where, for me, covering the recruiting side of things, spring portal window, we're already seeing it. They're after Ashad Williams out of North Alabama, who included Ole Miss in his top 4. He's one of the top available defensive backs. He's from Russellville, Alabama, so he's very familiar with Ole Miss and has that tie. I would be interested to see if he gets a visit scheduled here pretty soon. He's been to Arkansas. Ole Miss was on spring break, so it wasn't like they were battling it out for weekends to get him on campus. Arkansas was already in spring ball by that point. But, with him, he's somebody that kind of checks that box of that big, versatile defensive back that could play all over. He played corner. I believe he set an FCS record for pass breakups last year, so pretty impressive. I believe he had 10 just last year alone, so a really impressive guy who's kind of blown up. He told me, I wasn't really recruited, and now so I'm kind of taking this as it comes and letting the offers come in and things like that. But Ole Miss made his top schools. Arkansas is in there as well, and so things are progressing on that front. But the reason why I bring him up is because Ole Miss wants to add, more to the secondary. There's no doubt about that in the spring transfer portal window. So that little glimpse of guys running around, and at least however they look, with however we get to look at them, is probably going to shed a little bit of light on, just the athletes they have out there. And we know some of them already, but, just adjusting to Ole Miss, wherever they're coming from and how they look is going to tell us a lot. And it's going to tell the coaches a lot. And then we kind of dig up how they're feeling about that secondary room. And is it a 1-player ad? Is it a 2-player ad? So a lot of this with spring football impacts portal recruiting and what they want to check off, kind of in that spring portal window. So, to flip over to the offensive side, I still think somewhere along the offensive line, they probably want to find one more and see what they can do there. And again, that's where the overall lineup for John Garrison is going to be something that's looked at throughout spring as much as we can look at it, and kind of dive into how those players are looking and how they are progressing. Because once you figure that out, then you can kind of, as a staff, assess what they actually need out of the transfer portal. Because, Ole Miss is at the stage where, and Randall Joyner talked about this on a recent podcast that we wrote up for you guys at the Ole Miss Spirit. The expectation now is you got to get to 10 wins. People were mad, of course, when you missed the college football playoff, and that's a good thing. That's where you want to be. You don't want to be building a program and hoping to get bowl eligible. You want to be aiming for that college football playoff, and that's where they're at now. And that's why they're not going to leave any stone unturned. And to your point, you talked about this on other pods. This is not last year's team where it's college football playoff or bust, national championship contender or bust. It's an imperfect team, at least on paper. The number 2 portal class, there are more questions, losing as much as they did on the offensive line, the wide receiver room, the running back room still needs to be fixed as far as who emerges as that threat. And that's not a new storyline there. But there are so many questions, which makes this team imperfect, at least projecting them going into this season. But at the end of the day, the expectations and the results have backed up that Lane Kiffin and the staff have put together 10-win teams, and they've done it different ways. And, now that's the expectation, they have to continue to invest, especially with this being that last little bit of, at least what we think, the last little bit of unofficial NIL or unofficial rev sharing. They can still kind of back the truck up if they find the right guy or two to address their roster needs before rev share comes into play. And I think that, this program is, if they are in a position where they feel like they really need to do that, then they will pick the right guy and at least who they think is the right guy to do that with, if they see a hole that's, there. And so the early goings of spring ball, because it's going to be March 18th tomorrow, you're less than a month away from the spring transfer portal window. You got to find out what your plan is. You got to be ready to go. So that is kind of the early goings of spring, is watching those critical positions that they probably feel like they want to address in the portal, how they look, and then they can start their planning. And of course, we'll be there to cover the recruiting side of it for you at the Ole Miss Spirit. And they're going to have visitors on campus. 4-star quarterback Gavin Sidwar is going to be in town on Tuesday. So that's just one of the guys I'm expecting on campus on Tuesday.
All right. Well, I thought since it was opening up tomorrow, is spring football practices, we do a thought exercise. You ready? Essentially, I want you to give me a letter grade, A to F. It can be a plus. It can be a minus. On the field for Lane Kiffin, grade for last year up until this point, because now this is officially like the start of something new. There's on the field, off the field, and team building recruiting. All right. On the field, how would you grade Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin in 2024, now at the end of 25, as we flip the script 25-26? What's your letter grade?
Well, do we get I guess it's an all-encompassing grade, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like offense and defense?
On the field. Yeah, you have to, it's one encompassing grade. There's on the field, off the field, team building recruiting.
I guess on the field, probably B+.
That's exactly what I wrote.
God. See, this is why it's going to be a lot of fun doing this for many years to come, buddy.
I wrote that exactly. I wrote down B+. You know, you had the greatest modern era defense ever, and you broke school record for sacks and tackles for loss, and now you've completely lost all four of those starting. Now, Suntarine Perkins deserves to be on the college football video game cover. He is one of the absolute best edge pass rushers in college football. So, you know, they didn't lose everything, but man, they're replacing so much. And really that defense is what raised the grade for me, because offensively was frustrating. Not going back there. So let's say, okay, so on the field, we're in agreement. All right, B+. Off the field.
So what is this? It kind of break out off the field. What is this piece?
Culture, right? Okay. Like the transfer culture it's not just hire guns. You actually have to build out a team, like Chris Beard did, right? In this, like off the field or off the court in the world of Chris Beard has never been harder to navigate, because one, these kids are making real money. Two, how you handle frustrations as far as role or this, that, and the pro mindset stuff has been great for Lane, because it's like, you know, Hugh Freeze was all about, we're all in this together, kumbaya. Houston Nutt was, one heartbeat. Ed Orgeron was a psychopath. He was
a heartbeat guy too.
One heartbeat.
Heart rate was 180 all the time.
Pulling the rope in the same direction. This is about, hey, come in here, do your business. Yeah, so culturally in this new world, balancing all these personalities, this is where I gave him the highest grade, honestly. So how would you grade Lane in 2024-25 going into spring football?
Yeah, I think A. I mean, I just like
hard A.
I'm sure there's when you build a roster, I mean, through the portal, and we'll see how that changes over the years, but with the large part of it coming from the portal, you're going to have a guy here or there where you're going to have to babysit to get him to game day. You're going to have to babysit him to get him to class and do all those things. But that's why you get paid the big bucks. And you need those type of players, truthfully, in the SEC to compete. The guys that you do have to babysit that are who was it that said, I'm not here to play school? Cardell Jones? Was that
Cardell Jones? It's true. He's not here. They're not here to play school. And to make that into
you need a couple of those guys. And you got to babysit.
I'm really impressed with how Lane, you don't hear, like, for example, Georgia's dealing with it all the time. I mean, you know what I mean?
I mean, like, Georgia's expectations are national championship and a few arrests a week at this point.
Sorry, I mean, it's crazy, though. Like,
it's nuts.
There's something in the water there that's leading to them being the worst drivers ever. And like, it's systemically a problem at Georgia. You don't see those.
A good craft brewery scene there in Athens. Like, I don't know what's going on.
Maybe that's the problem. I don't know. Here, the deal is like, you don't hear. I'm sure there are systemic issues at Ole Miss. I've heard of some of those things, but none of it has been has bubbled up to the surface or been the black eye. Like what we've talked about in this transfer era for Ole Miss is what's happening on the field. And I think that, and of course, Lane's going to be Lane and do his stuff on Twitter that draws some storylines, but that's part of like having to constantly keep Ole Miss's brand in the conversation. That's more performative than anything. What I'm talking about is those systemic issues that have arisen because of the cult of personality, because of the money involved, because of the lack of guardrails. You just don't hear about those type of problems with a program. I think that most everyone would agree is like Transfer U, right?
Yeah.
Like this is where you should be hearing those things. So I had him as A+. I went and say, look, man, the fact that the only beef Ole Miss fans have had is why, you only won 9 games with the best roster ever assembled. Why, I'm not going to get into the Ulysses Bentley stuff. I'm not going to get into all the stuff again. I'm not doing it. But you know what I'm saying?
Off, the viewers just go, whoop.
Football is football is football. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like it's about the ball and not about what's coming out. Like what else? The extracurriculars. Like you're not worried about the Carson Beck story, where he goes to Miami, found him a Latina and is already messing things up. You know what I mean? Like I'm just saying, you don't hear the same kind of problems, Bill. All right. So last one, team building, recruiting. This is your lane. How would you rank them? Because
nice.
or grade them?
That's my lane.
Well, for this conversation.
No, lane. This is my lane.
Look, no, your lane is everything. Like that's what you're talking about.
No, Lane Kiffin. Lane. Yeah, come on now.
I was more thinking like, you talked about Randall being on a pod. I'm like, dude, that's your former teammate. Call him up and tell him to be on our podcast. What are you doing?
I know.
Anyway, all right. So team building, recruiting. Give me your grade.
So this involves obviously, like you said, the roster building, which you have the number 2 portal class. You continue, and it looks different than when you made splashes like Walter Nolan and Juice Wells and guys like that. But, I think this is probably A-, and here's why. Because we are so far into the Lane Kiffin time here in Ole Miss, and the expectations are now 10-win seasons and hitting those. But you also need to recognize where they're sitting here in the SEC, and every DB in America wants to play in the SEC. And the secondary is a group that probably needs 1 or 2 guys. And they're replacing Trey Amos, and it's a hard task, but they're looking for somebody to be that guy. And last year before this time, we didn't necessarily know that Trey was going to be Trey, but you're looking for that. And that is, maybe we're looking at this a year from now and we're saying, okay, Mason Dunn is the truth. And he came in and maybe played a lot as a freshman, and he's going into his 2026 season and he's looking like a complete boss, and secondary concerns are gone. But that's a group that, needs more help. Offensive line needs more help. Deep, the front 7, great. You're looking great there long-term. Wide receiver, I think there are, when you had to bring in as many wide receivers as they did, some questions. I think as far as what's next there, running back, the future kind of looks more solid. It seems like the quarterback will hinge on this 2026 class and getting a dude. They like, Austin Simmons. Obviously, that was a huge deal when he reclassified and they got him settled and he can develop. But there are enough like holes on this roster where they're going to be a good football team, but the roster building for me can't be like a hard A because there are questions. So as long as they back it up on the field, I feel good about A-. Like Ole Miss is now establishing like a pretty solid floor of what their team should be, which is not necessarily maybe when Lane Kiffin was hired, what you might have thought. You might have thought it would have been like 11, 12 wins and then 7 wins, or 11 and 6 or something like that. But he's established a really solid floor, which is why it's an A- for me. I mean, if they take a dive a little bit this season, I mean, nobody would fault them because of who they lost. But at the same time, the floor has been raised, and they're expected to be a good football team.
That's
so
why
when you have that type of roster built.
That's why I don't want people to get upset when I give them a B. It's not because a B is a bad grade. A B is a very solid grade. B's not only get degrees, they get you like top of class is what I learned. C's got me degrees. If you want to be fair to it, it's like, man, they did really strong work, which is what a B is in the off. But also I think about the running back recruiting. You know what I mean? When they had Ahmad Hardy here and they had Justice, like they missed on some guys. Now you could say, well, they decided not to pay him. Well, what is missing if you targeted them and it didn't work out? It's a miss.
Yeah.
However, it was a miss. It's a miss. You know?
And like 100%, because you've got to look at it from the standpoint of you needed a guy. Like you have Shakai Milne tonight. Everybody thinks he's going to be pretty good. You got Trey Hall, who came for nothing, I'll add. Like, I mean,
and he's hurt.
And he's hurt now. You've got some guys coming back, but you needed a running back. And in today's day and age of rev share and all that, that's where, you probably say, okay, you could probably do it by committee and maybe we'll manage it differently and maybe it'll look differently because of that. But it's a group that needed an influx of talent, and you kind of, like, I would think it's fair to say that you kind of had a bird in the hand with Ahmad Hardy if you wanted him enough. Now his number pretty insane, but there was a little bit. We weren't in the room, we don't know, but maybe there was a way to make it happen that made it a little bit more stomachable for everybody.
I love that, stomachable. I like that, more stomachable. Well,
the amount of money being spent, I mean, it's all about how much you can stomach paying somebody.
100%. And Ahmad Hardy, that number was ridiculous as far as what Ole Miss can pay. Like, I'm glad they go secure the bag of Missouri. That's awesome. But you're right, though. I mean, this feels a lot like the options are better, at least on paper. But it seems like the same kind of philosophy that got them into trouble last year when Quinshawn left. Right now, they didn't lose a Quinshawn, but you're looking to go get that dude. And but there weren't one running back, one legit, and not to say these other guys aren't legit, they're just unproven. Like Kewan Lacey, I think he's a former 4-star recruit. Like he could be a dude, but like they just haven't done it yet. So they didn't get that one guy like a Justice Hayes who you knew was going to come in and immediately be a top option in the room. So that knocked it down a little bit for me. The secondary, I still think, is so incomplete. There's so much left to do. That position was harder this year to recruit to for Ole Miss than any other position, only because the options weren't as plentiful.
Yeah, they weren't
Yeah. So like Antonio Kite, compared to the other options, like he's more of a depth piece that comes over from Auburn, but on paper, one of the better options that were available to them in the portal. So the secondary, I don't really hold it against them that the options were what they were and that they haven't filled it out, but that is a concern. Wide receiver is still a lot of unknown. Part of it is retaining your own roster or the lack of development when we think about team building recruiting. And the fact that 4-star wide receivers keep leaving, never playing, like Aiden Williams, has to go into the grade. You know what I mean? Or your backup quarterback situation that you don't really have an established guy to maybe push Austin Simmons. If Austin doesn't play well, I mean, Billy.
This could be.
I hope AJ Maddox.
I don't know who you go. I have no idea who you go to because I don't. Pierce Clarkson looks like a package guy. I mean, you go to AJ Maddox, but just totally unproven and
totally. And the same with Austin. But again, you're going to live or die with Austin Simmons this year. And if he's not what you thought he was, that's the most fascinating story. Not is Austin Simmons going to be good enough? It's what if he isn't? Yeah. What if he isn't? I mean, that changes everything about how they built the roster, right? So Austin Simmons has the most pressure. And there's a dude on YouTube that comments on pretty much every one of our videos that really doesn't like Austin Simmons, to which I want to say, man, this is the guy you need to be throwing the support behind, like, as much as you can, propping the guy up as much as you can. Because
confidence up.
Dude, if he's not good, it's just it could fall apart really easily. So there's just some incompletes as far as the roster building for me that led it to a B. But a B is good. I'm not knocking it. I'm just saying that it's not, for me. Culturally, I think Lane has built something that I never thought I would see, especially in this new era. And with the coach who was hired quite literally is to come in here and you figure you had him for 3 years and here he is for double that. You know what I mean?
Yep.
He was a hired gun and what he's built. And, there's so much to like about this team. So for me, it's just strictly about there are holes. There are holes left. And that's why you got to give it the grade that you give it. So for me, it's a B. But still, that's a hard passing grade, everybody. That's for like, I think that averages out to like a B plus overall, which I think everybody would go, yeah, that's about right. To get to 9 wins though, that bubble line for the college football playoff, it comes down to those problem areas though, and it all starts tomorrow. Yeah. And I'm fascinated to see Austin Simmons the leader. I really am, because I think this kid is chomping at the bit to get out there and be that guy, and it's in Jackson Dart. Few did it better, like it was a tough road for Jackson to get to the place that he got to, which was record setter, program great. So not only are you replacing that, which is enough pressure on its own, Bill, but I'm sitting here telling you, if Austin Simmons doesn't perform well, it's going to be hard for Ole Miss, because everything was built around him to support him, right? But I think Ole Miss knew that was what this season was going to be anyway. And if it hits, it's like a lottery ticket. If it hits, life-changing, right? If it doesn't, you're just back to where you always were, which is, all right, well, what's next? let's figure out another quick way to hit it up. But yeah, I'm really excited about spring football and basketball and the NCAA tournament, both men's and women's. Women should be hosting. And then finally, again, with baseball. Bullpen.
I thought it was encouraging. You know what I mean? Like, number 3 team in the country. Sure. I know that might sound like little whatever sunshiny, but like you win the Friday night, which was huge, I think, for Hunter to be a part of that.
True.
That
and his velocity was back up. That was encouraging.
Yep,
it dipped. Yes.
Anytime you can get that type of a confidence boost early in SEC play for a guy like him, okay, then you feel a little bit better. If you can at least, take Friday night, I mean, then you can obviously tee yourself up better against maybe other opponents. Like Arkansas is good, and then that you blew it on Sunday. Like,
I feel bad for Owen Pano, man, because that kid is going to be a good player. He's a major league draft pick in 3 years. It's going to happen. It doesn't look like that now. So always you're like, oh, what are you talking about? Well, he's in a rough patch. I mean, this is what we worried about. Just like it happened to Thomas Dillard. It happened to Gray Kessinger. Both guys ended up getting drafted very highly, being great productive players. It's happening to Owen, and that's the unfortunate thing, because you're hoping he'd be more Jacob Gonzalez than he would the other ones. And the worst thing for them was for Luke Chain to go down and for the game to come down to Owen's errors at shortstop, because that forces Mike's hands. Like, Mike, you can't run him out there. I mean, you risk absolutely debilitating mental stuff to do to this kid. I mean, I guess it's the Braden Randall show at shortstop, or hell, Luke Hill, put him back. Put Luke back at shortstop. He was your starting shortstop to start the year last year. Wasn't good, didn't have the arm for it. But all I know is that I'm worried about the future. I know how important Owen Pano is to the future of Ole Miss baseball, and how this is a very delicate time for him, because I agree there were so many encouraging things, but it's the things that held you back that you thought that you already kind of knew were problems, that ended up biting you in the butt. So I'm not going to get too high, too low. It's just unfortunate, because 2 or 3 just it looks a lot better than 1 and 3 and dropping 5 spots in top 25. Because Arkansas, you beat them up pretty good. I mean, you put it to them. You played them hard. You played them tough. You played them competitive, especially on Sunday when you fell behind. And old days, last 2 years, Ole Miss would have absolutely cratered. Right? Yeah. That team fought back. They tied it up. That's what was so disheartening about it. It's like, well, all these positive things happens, but the result was about similar to what it has been the last couple of years. So it's more of a wait and see there. I'm not going to overreact, but other than to say, Mike, take care of Owen, man, because that kid's in a delicate spot. I really feel for him, because I know how hungry he is. He was on our podcast in the fall, and man, the excitement he has for playing Ole Miss baseball, putting out, like, he didn't even think about going. Well, he did, because of course he did, but like, it was overwhelming. He could have gone to the major league draft. He would have gotten drafted in the top 6 rounds. The man stayed, like, told everybody, I want to go to Ole Miss. I know how bad he wants this. So I hate that he's dealing with it early on, but that's not going to derail him from being a great player down the road. Again, we point to Gray. We point to, I have so many Ole Miss players that have gone through that. I just hate that it happened to him. This happened to him now, and especially on that Sunday when they were right there to take 2 or 3. We'd probably lead the show with that. No, he wouldn't be the NCAA tournament, but it would get a little bit more top billing than it did, which was just a mention on the front end and the back end. It's I hate that, but whatever. Spring tomorrow. No good positive vibes only. NCAA tournament this weekend. Billy is in town. We're going to go live from after spring football tomorrow, right?
Yep, we're doing it.
We're doing it live after spring football from the friggin' field, maybe. We'll do something.
See if they'll let us out there.
Sure they will. Randall is your former teammate. All right. Most of them go, Ben, what are you doing? You can't do that, you dummy. But if we got Randall, that's my guy. I got Bill. Pull some strings for us. Lane doesn't want any of us out there. He don't want any of us out there. So that's a non-starter. And Pete, our guy Pete's just going to do what Lane wants him to do. So hey, we got to figure out a way, but we're going to do it. We're going to be live from spring practice and tell you what we see. Even though it won't be all that much, I'm going to get some video. I'm going to take the big 4K RiverLand Roofing camera and shoot all the position groups and all this kind of stuff, put some stuff together. Bill, I'm just excited, man. This is one of the best times of the year. January and February feel like the world has ended. And then spring rolls around, March Madness, Ole Miss in it. Now I feel like I'm rejuvenated, new life to me, Bill. So it's exciting.
Yeah. We're going to be talking about it all on Talk of Champions tomorrow after spring ball. So stay tuned. And also Chris Beard talks with the media Monday, just after lunch. So we'll be there to cover it as well. For Ben Garrett, I'm Billy Embody. Shout out RiverLand Roofing for all your roofing needs. Appreciate their support. And we'll be back live on Tuesday from spring ball. So catch you guys then. Thanks for listening and watching. And this has been Talk of Champions.